Hello and welcome back to the Tech Blackboard. Today in part 6 of DP203 exam Q&A series, we are going to cover 15 very latest exam questions. In today's part 6, I will be focusing on the questions related to Azure CNAPP Analytics, Azure Databricks, Azure Data Lake, Azure Data Factory and Azure Storage Account. There will be a lot of concepts on the above topics. Very important video, so watch it very carefully. Grab the concepts to get good grades in DP203 certification. And friends, at any stage of the video, if you find this video worth your time and an increase in your learning, please appreciate our efforts by pressing the like button, subscribing to the channel and press that bell icon to receive all the notifications of our upcoming videos. And for those who are new here today, it's worth mentioning that so far in the previous 5 parts, we have already covered 55 important questions on DP203. Please make sure to watch these previous parts as well. The links are given in the description box. And friends, videos are great to learn and understand the concept when you are online. But to help you revise the questions in the offline mode as well, I will share a free PDF file containing all the 15 questions and answers covered in this part 6. And for that, you have to give me the correct answers for the question number 57, 65 and question number 70. You will find all the answers in this video itself. So let's begin our part 6. So let's begin part 6 with a very interesting question number 56. The question says that you need to create a partition table in an Azure CNAPP Analytics dedicated SQL pool. How should you complete the transact SQL statement? To answer, drag the appropriate values to the correct targets. Each value may be used once, more than once, or not at all. You may need to drag the split bar between panes or scroll the view content. So here, my friends, you can see that you are given with some of the values like clustered index, collate, distribution, partition, partition function or partition schema. And then on the right hand side in this answer area, there is a create table query given. And you can very well note that this query is not complete. So you have to complete the query by choosing 2 options from these value table. Let's go to the Microsoft documentation and understand this query in more detail. But before that, there are 2 important keywords that you must keep in mind when we are going to the Microsoft documentation. The first one is this hash ID and the second one is this ID range left for values. So let's go to the Microsoft documentation now. So this is the Microsoft documentation on Create Table Azure CNAPP Analytics. And here you can see Microsoft has given an elaborated syntax on how you can create a table. So you can see this is the basic structure of the query. First we have create table, we have column options, we have column constraints, then we have table options here, and then we have data type. The part of this syntax where we will find answer is this one. And here you can see that we are given with distribution hash, and then in the bracket we are given with distribution column name. Similarly, we have partition here, and in the partition we are given with partition column name, range, left or right. So now my friends, if you relate this syntax given by Microsoft, you can see the value for the first box should be distribution and the value for the second box should be partition. So now let's reveal the answer to cross check. And now in the slide as well, you can see the distribution is the first answer and partition is the second answer. Hope that clarifies the logic behind choosing distribution and partition as the answer to this question. Now let's move ahead with question number 57. The question says that you have an Azure Databricks workspace named Workspace 1 in the standard pricing tier. You need to configure Workspace 1 to support auto-scaling all-purpose clusters. The solution must meet the following requirement. The first requirement is automatically scale down workers when the cluster is underutilized for 3 minutes. Then we have minimize the time it takes to scale to maximum number of workers. And the last requirement is minimize the cost. What should you do first? Your options are enable container services for Workspace 1. The second option is upgrade Workspace 1 to premium pricing tier. The third one is set cluster mode to high concurrency, and the fourth one is create a cluster policy in Workspace 1. And the correct answer to this question is option B, upgrade Workspace 1 to premium pricing tier. And here comes the reasoning behind it. We surely need optimized scaling, not the standard scaling, which is only part of premium plan. The reason is that we need to scale down after 3 minutes of underutilization, and standard auto scaling only allows scaling down after at least 10 minutes. Relating this logic to the question clearly mentions in the first requirement itself that automatically scale down workers when the cluster is underutilized for 3 minutes. Keep this in mind that please do not carried away always by the costing, because most of the time people have a tendency to choose the minimum possible pricing tier whenever they see minimum cost, but this is not the correct practice. You should also look at the other requirements as well. The minimum cost requirement might there be just to confuse you out. Let's move to question number 58. The question says that you have enterprise-wide Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account. The data lake is accessible only through an Azure virtual network named VNet1. You are building a SQL pool in Azure Synapse that will use data from data lake. Then the question says your company has sales team. All the members of the sales team are in Azure Active Directory group named sales. POSIX control are used to assign the sales group access to the files in the data lake. You plan to load the data to SQL pool every hour. You need to ensure that the SQL pool can load the sales data from the data lake. Which 3 actions should you perform? Each correct answer presents the part of the solution, and each correct selection is worth 1 point. Your options are add the managed identity to sales group. The second option is use the managed identity as the credentials for the data load process. The third one is create a shared access signature or SAS. The fourth one is add your Azure Active Directory account to the sales group. Fifth one is use the shared access signature as credentials for the data load process. And the sixth one is create a managed identity. The correct answer for this question is option A, option B, and option F. Now friends, here I want to stress on one more important aspect of this question. In real exam, Microsoft can change the question and they can also ask you to order the actions in the correct sequence. So let me give you the correct sequence. The first action that you need to perform is create a managed identity. The second action would be add the managed identity to the sales group. And the third action would be use the managed identity as the credentials for the data load process. So this is the correct sequence of the actions that you need to perform. So keep the sequence of the actions also in your mind. Now let's move to question number 59. The question says that you are designing a monitoring solution for a fleet of 500 vehicles. Each vehicle has a GPS tracking device that sends the data to an Azure Event Hub once per minute. Now you have a CSV file in an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 container. The file maintains the expected geographical area in which each vehicle should be. You need to ensure that when GPS position is outside the expected area, a message is added to another event hub for processing within 30 seconds. The solution must minimize the cost. What should you include in the solution? And here, my friends, as you can see, you have to answer on 3 levels. The first one is service. Then we have windowing option, and then the last one is analysis type. So let's check out the correct answer. The correct answer for the service option is Azure Stream Analytics. Then the correct answer for the windowing is hopping, and then the analysis type should be point with polygon. Moving on with question number 60. The question says that you are moving data from Azure Data Lake Gen 2 store to Azure Synapse Analytics. Which Azure Data Factory integration runtime would be used in a data copy activity? Your options are Azure Pipeline, Azure SSIS, or Azure or self-hosted. The correct answer to this question is option C, Azure. And this is because that when moving data between Azure Data Platform technologies, the Azure integration runtime is used when copying data between 2 Azure data platforms. And in case you want to read more on these Azure integration runtimes, then this is the Microsoft documentation. Here you can read about all the integration runtime. As we saw in the question, we have 3 options: Azure, self-hosted, and Azure SSIS. You can read all about these 3 integration runtime in this documentation. As always, link to all the documentation referred in this video is available in the description box. Coming to the question number 61, we have you are developing a solution that will use Azure Stream Analytics. The solution will accept an Azure Blob Storage file named customers. The file will contain both in-store and online customer details, and the online customers will provide a mailing address. And now the question says that you have a file in blob storage named location incomes that contains median incomes based on location. The file rarely changes and you need to use an address to look up a median income based on location. You must output the data to Azure SQL database for immediate use and to Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 for long-term retention. And the solution given here is that you implement a stream analytics job that has two streaming inputs, one query and two outputs. Does this meet the goal? Looking at the answer, we have no. The given solution is not able to resolve this business case. I am sure that you want to listen the logic behind the same. Stay with me. I will present the logic in question number 63 as this question has two more variations. The second variation is presented in question number 62. The question is exactly the same. However, this time the solution is that you implement a stream analytics job that has one query and two outputs. Does this meet the goal? And this time as well, the answer is no. So let's check out the correct solution in question number 63. And here the solution is that you implement a stream analytics job that has one streaming input, one reference input, and then we have two queries and four outputs. Does this meet the goal? And this time, my friends, the answer is yes. Coming to the logic behind this answer, so here you can see that we need one reference data input for location incomes, which rarely changes. You can see in the question it says that this file rarely changes. The second logic is that we need two queries, one for in-store customers and one for online customers. And I hope you can relate this as well to the question. The question clearly marks down that we have both in-store and online customers. Then the third logic is that for each query, two outputs is needed, and that makes a total of four outputs. And that's exactly what is given in the solution as well. So those are the three logics because of which I think that this solution fits this business case. And with that, let's move to question number 64. The question says that you have an Azure Data Lake storage account that contains a staging zone. You need to design a daily process to ingest incremental data from the staging zone, transform the data by executing an R script, and then insert the transformed data into a data warehouse in Azure CNAP Analytics. The solution given here is that you use an Azure Data Factory schedule trigger to execute a pipeline that copies the data to staging table in the data warehouse and then uses a stored procedure to execute the R script. Does this meet the goal? And once again, you have to tell whether this solution fits this business case. The correct answer for this question is no. Now let's jump to question number 65. The question says that which Azure Data Factory component contains the transformation logic or the analysis commands of the Azure Data Factory's work. Your options are linked service, datasets, activities, or pipelines. And the correct answer for this question is option C, activities. And in case you are interested to read more on Azure Data Factory component, then this is the Microsoft documentation. And here you can see that Microsoft has presented with usage scenarios. Then they have given with how does it work. And then Microsoft has given this very beautiful graphical representation of Azure Data Factory architecture. And below this image, you can see that Microsoft has listed all the key components of Azure Data Factory. You have pipelines here, activities, datasets, linked service, data flows, and integration runtime. Just below this, you are given with details of all the key components. And as you can see, we have activities here. Microsoft documentation says activities represent a processing step in the pipeline. For example, you might use a copy activity to copy data from one data store to another data store. And similarly, my friends, you can read all about the key components of Azure Data Factory in this Microsoft documentation. Now let's jump to question number 66. The question says that you have an Azure Data Factory that contains 10 pipelines. You need to label each pipeline with its main purpose of either ingest, transform, or load. The labels must be available for grouping and filtering when using the monitoring experience in the data factory. What should you add to each pipeline? Your options are a resource tag, a user property, an annotation, a run group ID, or a correlation ID? The correct answer for this question is option C, an annotation. A quick detail on annotations. So annotations are additional informative tags that you can add to specific factory resources like pipelines, datasets, linked service, and triggers. And friends, by adding annotations, you can easily filter and search for specific factory resources. And that's the reason behind choosing annotation as the answer to this question. Now let's move to the question number 67. The question says that you have an Azure storage account and an Azure SQL data warehouse in UK South region. Now friends, you need to copy blob data from the storage account to the data warehouse by using Azure Data Factory. The solution must meet the following requirement. The first one is to ensure that the data remains in UK South region all the times. The second requirement is minimize administrative efforts. Which type of integration runtime should you use? Your options are Azure Integration Runtime, Self-Hosted Integration Runtime. The third one is Azure SSIS Integration Runtime. And the correct answer to this question is option A, Azure Integration Runtime. And friends, I just shared the details of different Azure Integration Runtime in question number 60. So please refer the same documentation that I presented in question number 60 for this question as well. Now let me present you three back-to-back questions on Azure Databricks cluster. So let's check out question number 68, and that says that you are planning to use Azure Databricks cluster for a single user. Which type of Databricks cluster should you use? Your options are standard, single node, or high concurrency. The correct answer for this question is standard. Stay with me, I will present the Microsoft documentation in question number 70. For now, let's check out question number 69. The question says that you are planning to use Azure Databricks cluster that provide fine-grained sharing for maximum resource utilization and minimum query latencies. The question also points that it should be also a managed cloud resource. Which type of Databricks cluster should you use? Again, the options are standard, single node, and high concurrency. And the correct answer this time is option C, high concurrency. And this, my friends, brings us to the question number 70, which is the last question for part 6 DP203 exam Q&A series. And this question says that you are planning to use Azure Databricks cluster with no workers and runs Spark jobs on the driver node. Which type of Databricks cluster should you use? Options are again the same, standard, single node, or high concurrency. And this time the correct answer is option B, single node. And as promised, my friends, let me take you to the Microsoft documentation. So this is the Microsoft documentation that explains the configuration options that are available when you create and edit Azure Databricks clusters. And if you will scroll down a little more on this documentation, you will come to a section that says cluster mode. And here, my friends, Microsoft has clearly mentioned that Azure Databricks supports 3 cluster modes: standard, high concurrency, and single node. You can read all about these cluster modes on this documentation. Before concluding this question, I want to say that friends, on many sites, you would be seeing many other clustering modes like automated, interactive, or job. But friends, as per my understanding, these options are related to AWS and not Azure. In Azure, as I showed you in the Microsoft documentation, there is nothing like automated clusters, interactive cluster, or job cluster. So please be very careful. I have shown you the legit Microsoft documentation, and that should be the only source of truth for Azure examinations. In case you have any other thoughts or feedback on cluster-based questions, do let me know in the comment section. And friends, it does take a lot of time and effort to compile all the questions, validate the answers, and bring the right Microsoft documentation for each question. So before you leave the video, please press that like button and subscribe to the channel. It's a small step for you, but it gives me a big boost and encourages me to keep bringing quality content to you. I am looking forward for your feedback and what are the questions you want me to cover in the upcoming parts. You can also connect with me on the other social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Information for the same is now flashing on your screen and also available in the description box. Thank you everyone for your valuable time. I will see you in the next video. Till then, stay fit, keep learning, and thanks for watching.
If this video has added any value in your learning, a like and subscribe is highly appreciated. Share this video in your family and friends to spread and expand their learning. Your comments and feedback give me a chance to interact with you, and I look forward for them. We will meet again in our next video. Till then, stay fit, keep learning, and thanks for watching.